إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين به ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد رسول الله أرسله الله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يعصهما فإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بعد أن أقول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أسكنوهن من حيث سكنتم من وجدكم ولا تضاروهن لتضيقوا عليهن وإن كن أولات حمل فأنفقوا عليهن حتى يضعن حملهن فإن أرضعن لكم فآتوهن أجورهن وأتمروا بينكم بمعروف وإن تعاسرتم فسترضع له أخرى لينفق ذو سعة من سعته ومن قدر عليه رزقه فلينفق مما آتاه الله لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما آتاها سيجعل الله بعد عسر يسرا. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من رزقه الله امرأة صالحة فقد أعانه على شطر دينه فليتق الله في الشطر الباقي. أما بعد. Respected brothers, elders, ulama, a'imma, with the blessings and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have once again been guided to attend a masjid from the masajid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to testify to His oneness and to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this blessed day, the Eid of the week, the Jummah. The Jummah that if you pray properly and then if you pray another one in the following week, then all the sins in between are forgiven inshaAllah tabarak wa ta'ala. This is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we thank Allah continuously. Walhamdulillah, walhamdulillah, walhamdulillah. Over the past few weeks we've been speaking about the concept or the ideas behind improving our society to bring it towards a society of peace, a society of unity, love, affection, and more importantly, a society which comes together to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one ummah, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam described it in a hadith. We have agreed and we have said that for a society to be put together and for us to love one another and for affection to be built and for us to feel for one another like we are supposed to feel for every part of our body, we need to first of all cement ourselves with the adab and akhlaq and the character of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because alongside with the Quran saying that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent as a rahmah, he himself says that I have been sent but to perfect akhlaq and perfect character. And so we find that the rahmah and the ulfa and the mahabba and the mawadda that we are supposed to have between ourselves is to come about by having perfect adab and akhlaq towards ourselves, towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, towards our parents, towards our children, towards our spouses. And last Jummah and the Jummah before that, we have been speaking about the importance of adab and akhlaq between the two partners, the spouses, and how to go about perfecting and establishing ground rules to having a good relationship within the home. In the first part of this khutbah we have said that the concept and the contract of marriage is a very serious one. In the second khutbah last week we spoke about how to nurture and develop the good character and the good things your spouses came into the marriage with. So for example, your parents were instructed to give to you as children good food, good drink, good adab and akhlaq, good education, good self-esteem, good spirituality. In a marriage, you are to, as a spouse, as a husband, as a wife, to enable and to assist your spouse to continue to progress in these fields. So you are not to, for example, stop someone from having healthy food and make them go towards unhealthy food. You are not to hinder someone from having healthy drinks to make them go towards unhealthy drinks, because you are supposed to be developing and increasing one another towards the goodness. You are not supposed to be a hindrance from the taqwa of Allah or salawat on time. So a wife shouldn't stop her husband from going to the masjid 5 times a day. Rather, she should increase in encouragement to him or for him to go to the masjid. A husband should not be a reason by burdening her with extra activities or work, shouldn't be a hindrance for her salat and her ibadah. He should, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by his efforts, allow her or facilitate for her to worship Allah even more. He should wake her up for tahajjud. He should wake her up for fajr. A lot of brothers, we come to the masjid for fajr, but our wives do not pray, our sisters do not pray, our brothers do not pray. And so we are to not just nurture good things in our children, but then that responsibility is handed over to the spouses after marriage to continue to nurture them and to improve in them and to progress with them. Today, inshallah, in our khutbah, bi'idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala, we want to speak a bit more about the rights and responsibilities of the spouses in a marriage, because we have made indications in the khutbahs before that there are rights and responsibilities in a marriage. But as a good person, or as a person who wants good for your family and for your society, we should ideally focus more on our responsibilities than our rights. We should focus more on what am I giving rather than what am I receiving. In that way, there will be a reduction in the amount of emotion that comes out from, for example, why didn't you do such and such for me, and so on and so forth. The rights and responsibilities is the topic of our khutbah today, inshallah ta'ala. First of all, Allah is very clear in the Quran, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is very clear in his narrations of ahadith, in his ahadith, about how a family should exist, how a family should live, and how a wife should be treated by her husband. In Surah Al-Talaq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that a man is to provide for his woman many, many things. And amongst these things, amongst her rights upon you as a husband, is that the woman, your wife, should be receiving from you a good home, a decent home, a good shelter. This good or this decent shelter is defined by your ability. By your ability. Your ability is something that you need to be honest about. You as a man, when you have an employment or a job of £50,000 a year, but you only provide your family with a home of 1 bedroom, that's not being honest to yourself. Whereas in a similar way, if you are not doing so well in your income, then you are not to be forced or oppressed into having a larger home than you can afford. And so a wife should be receiving a decent home, a decent shelter, based on your ability. But both sides need to be fair and just about that. The next demand or the next right of the woman is provision, food, drink, and provision for the home. So you are to do the shopping and to provide food, and that's your responsibility individually. If the wife says that I will not do any more shopping from my own expenditure, from my own income, she does not have to. It is your responsibility as a man to spend on your family, and by and large we do so, but this is just to sort of put into practice some of the sort of defining things that will make sure that there is no oppression. So generally you are supposed to provide for your family, food and drink. Your shopping should be based on your ability once again. And so you shouldn't go out there using a credit card, put yourself into extra debts to buy extra meat, to buy prawn, and to buy expensive food products. You are supposed to spend based on your ability. In a similar way, when you have a handsome amount of income coming into your account, you work at a job firm which provides you with £70,000, £80,000, you shouldn't just be shopping from the cheaper brands or the lower kind of foods and a lack of taste in them. You should try to provide لِيُنْفِقْ ذُو سَعَةٍ مِّن سَعَةِ. Everyone should spend based on their ability and the sort of relaxed income that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives each and every single one of you. The third demand or right of a woman is to provide her with clothing and to provide her children and your children with also clothing. And again, you need to be fair in that. You shouldn't oppress yourself, overburden yourself to buy high branded clothes. It's not just about buying Russell and Bromley shoes and Hugo Boss watches and River Island clothes. if you are in a low income, you are allowed to buy clothes which are maybe not so expensive. But however, if you are in a higher income, you should spend from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And in a very similar way, the wife, the spouse, should not demand from her husband what she knows that he cannot afford. We are very sensitive and very careful when we come to dealing with other people outside of our marriages. We are very, for example, careful with someone coming your way on the pavement or on the road. But when it comes to your own home, we are sometimes very, we lack consideration towards what my husband can afford for me, what my wife can actually do for me in comfort. And so therefore, clothing is a responsibility, but based on fairness and justice. Time. In a marriage, your wife deserves and has a demand of some of your time. You have time for everything, for your job, for your friends, and for your community work, for even your ibadah. But often we find that we don't give enough time or a set amount of time for our families, for our wives. Your wife and your children have a right over your time. The Prophet ﷺ used to give enough time to his family, to his wife. Sometimes he used to go and visit all of his wives in one day, and so he used to spend enough time with his family. Time is something very essential. In fact, it's probably the most important of your assets that you can give to your family. So many sisters, so many husbands complain that my wife, my husband, she has time for everything, but not for me. And so therefore spending time, giving time, specifying time to spend with your family. And thereafter, if there are some agreements that you have made while you were getting married in the marriage contract, for example, the sister made an agreement that you shouldn't take me too far away from this country or from my home, then you should also respect those terms and conditions so far as that they are good and halal terms and conditions. Now these are some of the rights of a woman over a man. Let's now come to the other side. What kind of rights does a man have over his wife? We find that a man, a husband, should receive from his wife beautiful adab and akhlaq and beautiful presentation. We find that our sisters are often very busy with beautifying themselves when it comes to non-family related occasions. We find that going outside is a big deal and going shopping is a big deal. But when it comes to just welcoming your husband, just welcoming your family to the house, it doesn't matter what I'm wearing. It doesn't matter how I look. And so to make an effort to make sure you beautify yourself or present yourself in a nice way to your husband, to your family, is common sense. Rather, it's a responsibility upon your shoulder. To make sure that your husband receives the best of you in terms of adab and akhlaq and your appearance and generally yourself. And in a similar way, your husband as well. Prophet ﷺ used to present himself to his wife in the most beautiful of fashions. He used to perfume himself. He used to overflow himself with perfume sometimes. And he used to ensure that his breath was smelling correct. And he was using the siwak before he used to go to his homes. And so it's an equal and shared responsibility to make sure that your presentation is correct. A husband has over his wife the right of cooperation. If the husband needs something to be done in the house, some work needs to be done, he needs to do something, something needs to happen, he asks of a favor, he asks of something, there should be cooperation within the family. There should be cooperation from the wife. And so cooperation with your husband is one of your responsibilities as a wife. And it's your husband's right as a husband. You're also, as a wife, your responsibility is to protect and to guard the home, the family home, and the wealth that the husband brings into the home. So what does that mean? What it means is, of course, to make sure that the house is locked up properly, generally, but also to make sure that it's kept in a good way, because protection entails also beautification sometimes. If you do not keep your house in a proper way, it will damage itself over time, and therefore to ensure that the home is in a good state is one of the responsibilities of a woman. It's also the responsibility of a man, but it's a shared responsibility, but some are more specific to certain individuals, and so therefore the home is generally, we find, is more of a responsibility to make sure that the home is protected and correctly used and correctly managed. We find it's a responsibility of the wife within the relationship. We also find that the wealth, so for example, you have a shared account, you have 2 cards. You shouldn't, as the wife, as the spouse, as the female spouse, go out there and excessively spend. We are very considerate towards our friends. We think about, hey, how much am I going to harm him? Is this going to overburden him? But then when it comes to your most close and beloved person to your life, your partner of life, we are very inconsiderate sometimes. We need to think about what would harm him, what would offend that person, what would make them upset. We work hard towards relationships that give us good in the dunya. So for example, I have a business partner who I work together with, and I find myself calling him in the evening, on the weekend, is everything okay? We're fine, okay, the meeting coming next week, we're all good. And so we put an extra amount of effort to make sure that the dunyawi, the business things are fine. But then when it comes to your family, your wife, your husband, there is a lack of effort and energy sometimes, which then deteriorates into bigger problems and sadness and emotions and loneliness and sort of depression and other emotions that can come in later on. So to say that there are rights, but what you should do as a spouse is think about what you are presenting more than what you are receiving. In that way, you stay far away from being upset over stuff. And also, if everyone makes sure that they are doing the rights, the responsibilities, then the rights are automatically done. If you make sure your responsibilities are done, then the rights of the other person is already complete. And to put in an actual physical amount of effort towards your marriage is something that's demanded. One of the points that I want to make, inshallah, maybe today or maybe in the khutbah coming, is that marriage is supposed to be a source of increasing relationships, to increase my relatives and to increase my in-laws. And so we become into a bigger family through marriage. That's correct, that I get married to a sister and her family is now my in-laws. And the sister gets married to a brother and his whole family are now her in-laws. But what we find sometimes is that marriages do not serve that purpose, they rather do the opposite in society. We find that often through marriages, we cut off relationships. We find that through marriages, we often cut off relationships. We find that the husband no longer is in good communication and connection with his mum or his dad. We find that the sister, who used to be very close to her sisters and her friends, is no longer so close. So we find that the marriage, instead of providing more connection to society, and instead of the marriage being a means of building proper relationships, stronger relationships within society to connect it more, we find that we sever and we cut off ties through marriage and because of marriage. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after the death of Khadija al-Kubra radiallahu anha, many years after, when he used to remember Khadija, he used to send gifts to the friends of Khadija radiallahu anha. Subhanallah, what a beautiful example that we should take care of the friends of your wife. We should take care of the friends of your husband. And so when they come to the house knocking, you shouldn't be like, oh, who is it? Go away. No, come in, welcome. Have a cup of tea. When your wife wants to go to her mother's house for a weekend, you shouldn't be like, oh, why? We have so many things to do. You need to hoover the house and so on and so forth. You should be, no, let me take you. Let me buy some gifts for your mom. Let me buy some gifts for your dad. And in a similar way, when the husband wants to spend time with his mom, with his dad, to serve his mom, to serve his dad, this should be not something that you allow, something that to encourage him to do. Because we have said before, marriage is supposed to be something that encourages you towards good. And so the Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith that whoever has been granted a good, a pious wife, he has been assisted in half of his deen. And so he should fear Allah in the remaining half of his deen. So a marriage should be a source of goodness of all types. It should be the source of your happiness. It should be the source of your success. It should be the source of your connection to your family, and not the opposite. And this is a topic maybe we can spend a bit more time on in the future, that marriages sometimes take families apart. And that shouldn't be the case. Marriages are sometimes reasons for why dads are upset with their sons, why mums are upset with their daughters, and this shouldn't be the case. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لكم ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. نحمد الله حمد الشاكرين ونصلي ونسلم على النبي الكريم محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. The topic of social improvement, the topic of marriage and how to live a healthy marriage, these are topics that are very, very important. So we have spent 3 khutbahs on this marriage itself. And inshallah in the future we intend to speak about adab and akhlaq between relatives, and adab and akhlaq towards your neighborhood and towards your neighboring Muslim and non-Muslim friends. And we'll inshallah speak also about adab and akhlaq towards your neighborhood, towards the society and towards the environment that you live in, the animals and the plantations, and to make sure that we as Muslims are playing a positive role in improving society in all aspects, inshallah. Allahumma ighfir al-Muslimin wal-Muslimat wal-Mu'minin wal-Mu'minat al-Ahya'i minhum wal-Amwat إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات. اللهم أيد الإسلام والمسلمين، اللهم انصرنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. أذهب البأس رب الناس واشف أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاءك شفاء لا يغادر سقما. اللهم اغفر لنا وللمسلمين جميعا يا رب العالمين. وصل الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين، وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استوى اعتدل واستقيم وتسليم برأس الناس من التوحيد. خلف سوق الخروج محمد خالد زادنا المزاني. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. وإذ أخذنا ميثاق بني إسرائيل لا تعبدون إلا الله وبالوالدين إحسانا وذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وقولوا للناس حسنا وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة ثم توليتم إلا قليلا منكم وأنتم معرضون. وإذ أخذنا ميثاقكم لا تسفكون دماءكم ولا تخرجون أنفسكم من دياركم ثم أقررتم وأنتم تشهدون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أسكنوهن من حيث سكنتم من وجدكم ولا تضاروهن لتضيقوا عليهن وإن كن أولات حمل فأنفقوا عليهن حتى يضعن حملهن فإن أرضعن لكم فآتوهن أجورهن وأتمروا بينكم بمعروف وإن تعاسرتم فسترضع له أخرى لينفق ذو سعة من سعته ومن قدر عليه رزقه فلينفق مما آتاه الله لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما آتاها سيجعل الله بعد عسر يسرا